Few names in the entertainment industry carry a mystery as peculiar as Nicolas Cage. Known for his unique acting style and unusual decisions both on and off the screen, the actor often makes headlines for reasons that go beyond his work. However, what draws the most attention is not his eccentric choices, but an old photograph, dated 1870, that puzzled the world by showing someone who appears to be Cage's exact double. Is the actor merely a human with timeless features, or is there something more behind this enigmatic figure? Welcome to another night where mysteries never sleep. I am Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube show these videos to more people and allowing me to continue bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's get into the video. The fascination with immortality has always permeated human culture, from ancient myths to contemporary theories. However, few imagine this idea could be linked to a Hollywood celebrity until the emergence of the 1870 photograph. Sold on an online auction site in 2011, the image displayed a man bearing an identical resemblance to Nicolas Cage, causing an instant stir. The claim was bold, proof that Nicolas Cage is a vampire. Come on, who hasn't wondered about living forever? But in Nicolas Cage's case, this idea comes with an extra dose of weirdness. The photo, discovered by an antique collector in Seattle, shows a man with facial features perfectly matching those of the actor. The distinctive jawline, intense eyes, and even the enigmatic expression led many to believe it wasn't just a resemblance, but actual evidence that Cage could have lived during that era. Are we looking at a distant ancestor or Nicolas Cage himself moving through the ages? The viral effect was inevitable. Forums and social media were flooded with theories blending humor and genuine speculation. Some argued the image was a hoax or a bizarre coincidence, but the mystery persisted. After all, the collector adamantly claimed the photo was authentic, backed by documented evidence of its late 19th century origin. Interest grew as comparisons were made between photos of the actor over the years. In interviews, Cage has always appeared to age, albeit at a pace that seemed much slower than expected for someone his age. This, coupled with the photograph, fueled the hypothesis that he might be immortal. But what truly sustains this theory? One reason is Cage's public persona. Unlike other celebrities, he doesn't seem concerned about justifying the eccentricities that define his life and career. This lack of explanation only amplifies the perception that there's something different about him. After all, how does someone maintain such a long career while seeming like a constant in an ever-changing world? Furthermore, the idea of an immortal celebrity isn't new. Popular culture often depicts immortal figures as charismatic, eccentric, and removed from the ordinary, traits that undoubtedly fit Cage. His reserved demeanor, coupled with public appearances that always spark new speculations, reinforces this narrative. Is he hiding something, or simply enjoying playing with the mystery? What's most intriguing is that the 1870 photograph isn't an isolated case. Other examples of historical figures resembling celebrities have surfaced, but none had the same impact as Cage's case. This is because, in his situation, the puzzle pieces seem to fit almost perfectly. He not only resembles the man in the photograph, but also exudes an almost timeless aura. Documented evidence or cosmic coincidences? That's the question many ask themselves. Experts in the history of photography analyzed the image and confirmed its authenticity, but the answers weren't enough to end the debate. How do we explain the resemblance? Could science provide an answer, or are we facing something that defies logic? Interestingly, Nicolas Cage seems unfazed by the rumors. In interviews, he has been directly asked about the subject. Instead of categorically denying it, he humorously responded, "I'm not a vampire, but if I were, I'd never tell." This answer, rather than ending the discussion, left even more questions in the air. The fact that he doesn't outright dismiss the possibility further intrigues his fans. After all, why not definitively deny it if the idea is absurd? This has led many to speculate that he might actually be playing with public curiosity, or that there's a grain of truth to the theory. What if he truly is immortal? History is full of accounts of people who seem to transcend time, from alchemists to supposed time travelers spotted in different eras. Could Cage be another one of these cases? While science attempts to explain the inexplicable, the public continues to wonder: coincidence or concrete proof? One thing is certain, Nicolas Cage isn't just an actor, he's an enigma. The vampire archetype has long fascinated humanity. These immortal creatures, living on the fringes of society, are often described as mysterious, charming, and full of secrets. It's not hard to see why many view Nicolas Cage as the modern embodiment of this myth. His choice of roles, public behavior, and timeless appearance seem to resonate with the traits we associate with vampires. One of the most intriguing examples lies in his film Vampire's Kiss, 1988. In the plot, Cage plays a man who believes he has been turned into a vampire after a peculiar nighttime encounter. His exaggerated and sometimes chaotic performance received mixed reviews, but the film achieved cult status over the years. Many believe Cage, by choosing this role, was hinting at something deeper, a kind of nod to what he might actually be. That's So Cage, a random 80s movie that suddenly becomes evidence he might really be a vampire. Choosing unusual roles isn't rare in his career. Nicolas Cage is known for diving into extreme characters, often laden with emotional intensity and strange behaviors. In films like Ghost Rider, he plays an antihero who literally sells his soul to the devil. This tendency to explore dark and supernatural stories hasn't gone unnoticed by conspiracy theorists. Could his choices reflect something he knows on a personal level? Beyond his roles, there's something unsettling about his presence. Nicolas Cage doesn't just play eccentric characters, he is eccentric. His lifestyle and public behavior often resemble descriptions of vampires in literature and cinema. He's rarely seen at common social events, opting for a more reserved life. When he does appear, his statements are shrouded in mystery, as if he's carefully choosing what he can and cannot reveal. But what about his appearance? Vampires are often described as beautiful and timeless, traits that also apply to Cage. His features seem to resist the changes time inevitably brings. Of course, celebrities have access to advanced aesthetic treatments, but this explanation doesn't suffice for those who believe in his supernatural nature. Could he have truly found a way to cheat time? The connection between Nicolas Cage and vampires extends beyond his looks and acting. His public personality further reinforces this idea. He has a peculiar sense of humor and often uses absurdity to answer intriguing questions. During an interview, when asked what he would do if he were a vampire, he responded enigmatically, "I'd probably live in New Orleans. It's a place full of history and energy." Coincidence or a carefully placed clue? New Orleans, incidentally, is a city deeply rooted in vampire lore. The city has been the backdrop for countless supernatural stories, from Anne Rice's novels to local legends about beings who walk among us. It's no surprise that Nicolas Cage purchased a pyramid-shaped tomb in the city, an act that raised even more questions about his connection to the occult. Some people point out that the actor seems to enjoy feeding the mystery. He never categorically denies the theories about his immortal nature. Instead, he seems to play along, allowing speculation to flourish. Is this attitude merely a publicity stunt, or does Cage truly know something we're not ready to understand? Interestingly, his eccentricity also connects him to other aspects of the vampire archetype. Vampires, in fiction, are often portrayed as collectors of historical artifacts and unique objects. Cage, for his part, has owned castles, a rare comic book collection, and even a dinosaur skull. These eccentric acquisitions reinforce the idea that he might be more than he appears. Some critics argue that it's all just a coincidence, that Cage is merely a man with unusual tastes and a penchant for eccentric roles. However, these same people fail to explain why he continues to be such a mysterious figure, even in a world saturated with information and social media. Perhaps there's something about him that simply cannot be conventionally explained. The connection between Nicolas Cage and the vampiric archetype is not solely based on appearances or cinematic roles. It is fueled by his personality, choices, and the way he positions himself in the world. It is almost as if he is playing a character that transcends reality itself. But is this merely acting? Fascination with Nicolas Cage seems to grow each year, along with the theories about his true nature. Some see him as a living metaphor, a reminder that humanity still yearns for something beyond the tangible, a touch of the supernatural in an increasingly skeptical world. Yet, when we look at Cage, the question remains, coincidence or destiny? When it comes to eccentricity, few public figures can rival Nicolas Cage. His acquisitions, often described as bizarre, have raised speculations that his interests go beyond mere whims. Do these objects reflect the mind of an eccentric collector, or do they hide clues to a past far longer than we imagine? One of the most famous examples is the dinosaur skull cage acquired at an auction for $276,000. The fossil, dated millions of years, was described as an extremely rare relic. However, what stands out is not just the purchase, but the object's ultimate fate. It was discovered that the skull had been smuggled from Mongolia, and Cage was required to return it to the authorities. But why would someone be willing to invest so much in something so unusual? This acquisition was just one among many others that reinforced the aura of mystery surrounding the actor. He also bought 2 castles in Europe, one in Germany and another in England. Castles are historically associated with powerful figures and often the supernatural. The idea that Cage might be connected to ancestral traditions of royalty or even the occult began to gain traction among conspiracy theorists. Another intriguing item in his collection is the pyramid-shaped tomb he commissioned in New Orleans. The tomb, located in the famous St. Louis Cemetery, is surrounded by macabre stories and is known to house the remains of legendary and mysterious figures. The pyramid, over 2 meters tall, bears the Latin inscription Omnia Uno, everything from one. Is this a simple tribute to mortality, or a symbol of something greater that Cage knows but does not share? These eccentric purchases did not stop there. Cage also acquired a private island in the Bahamas, a remote and isolated location that many believe is perfect for someone who requires seclusion. The question is, seclusion from what? Why would someone so exposed to the public want to isolate themselves in a space where no one can see them? The properties and objects he has accumulated over the years have created a narrative that goes beyond mere extravagance. Collectors generally have a theme or logic behind their acquisitions. In Nicolas Cage's case, the pieces seem disconnected at first glance, but upon closer inspection, there is a pattern. Each object has a link to time, history, and in some cases, the supernatural. The dinosaur skull, the castles, and the pyramid are not the only examples. He also bought a mansion in New Orleans that is reportedly haunted. Known as the home of Madame LaLaurie, the property has one of the city's darkest histories. Madame LaLaurie was an infamous figure, notorious for horrific acts of torture in the 19th century. The property has a reputation for being cursed, raising another question. Why would Cage, who seemingly does not publicly adhere to the supernatural, be interested in a house so steeped in macabre symbolism? While some see these acquisitions as a reflection of his eccentric personality, others believe they are evidence of something deeper. People with extremely long lives, such as vampires or immortals described in myths, are often portrayed as guardians of ancient and valuable objects. Is Cage merely collecting, or is he gathering pieces of a past he personally witnessed? The way he approaches these questions is also curious. In interviews, he avoids delving into details about his collection, quickly changing the subject or using humor to deflect inquiries. This creates even more mystery around his motivations. After all, why would someone so public be so reserved about these acquisitions? Even the most skeptical critics admit that Cage's choices are unusual. He does not invest in traditional luxury goods like cars or jewelry. Instead, he prefers historical artifacts and locations filled with meaning. This behavior only reinforces speculation that he might be seeking more than material possessions. Perhaps he is trying to preserve something he considers crucial. And if we consider his connections to historical figures, these choices make even more sense. Cage is genealogically linked to the British royal house, and by extension, to Vlad the Impaler, one of the historical inspirations for Dracula. Could he, knowingly or not, be preserving this heritage? What is most intriguing is how these purchases align with the vampire archetype. In literature and cinema, these creatures are often associated with ancient treasures and isolated locations. Cage's actions seem almost a reflection of this myth, as if he is playing a role that, in some way, transcends his public life. So why does Nicolas Cage continue to fuel this mystery? Are his acquisitions merely the result of a unique personality, or a puzzle pointing to something much greater? The idea that Nicolas Cage might be more than just an eccentric actor gained a new layer of mystery when information about his possible genealogical connections emerged. Ancestry studies revealed that Cage is linked to the British royal house, a detail that, at first glance, might seem irrelevant. However, this connection raises the possibility that he shares ties with Vlad the Impaler, the historical figure who inspired the character Dracula. Vlad, also known as Vlad Tepes, was a 15th century prince of Wallachia, famous for his brutality and supposed association with the supernatural. His story gave rise to the modern vampire myth, popularized by Bram Stoker in Dracula. The fact that Nicolas Cage is genealogically linked to Vlad's descendants is more than enough to ignite theories connecting the actor to the vampire archetype. But how relevant is this connection? So, if Nicolas Cage decides to bite someone, I wouldn't say it's just a coincidence, would you? The relationship between Cage and the British royal house is traced through direct descent, placing him in the same bloodline as historical figures shrouded in mystery and controversy. While such genealogical connections are more common than they seem, due to the intermingling of lineages over centuries, the idea that Cage might carry noble blood, in a literal sense, has sparked fascination. Is he merely an heir to a rich history, or is there something more hidden in this past? Interestingly, Cage has never openly rejected this connection. In interviews, he tends to address the subject with a mix of humor and seriousness, suggesting that he believes in the power of ancestry. On one occasion, he commented that he views life as a sequence of cycles, and that genetic heritage plays a more significant role than many imagine. These statements, though vague, have only added to the speculation. The connection with Vlad the Impaler also raises questions about how Cage perceives his own history. Vlad is a figure surrounded by legends that blend historical facts with fiction. Does Cage, known for his interest in supernatural and mysterious themes, see in this ancestry something that links him to a greater truth about the world? In addition, there are accounts of other historical figures who share physical similarities with Nicolas Cage. A photograph of a Civil War soldier, for instance, also caught attention for its striking resemblance to the actor. These findings, along with the 1870 photograph, create an intriguing pattern. Is Cage simply a person with genetic traits that have persisted through the centuries, or is he something that transcends time? The narrative of noble descent and alleged connections to notorious historical figures is often used to justify the idea that Cage might be immortal. After all, many vampire stories are deeply rooted in noble lineages and ancient ancestors who possess secrets about longevity. The connection to Vlad only strengthens this theory. What makes all of this even more fascinating is how Cage seems perfectly at ease with these speculations. He has never shown discomfort with the idea of being associated with dark historical figures or immortality. For some, this is a sign that he may be consciously or unconsciously fueling these stories. For others, it's simply the behavior of someone who doesn't take such theories seriously. But how can one explain the fact that Cage continues to appear timeless in a world where aging is constantly documented? Photographs from decades ago show a man who, despite some changes, maintains a surprisingly preserved appearance. Of course, this could be attributed to good genetics or even aesthetic treatments, but it does not eliminate the curiosity of those seeking more unconventional explanations. His historical lineage also places Nicolas Cage in an interesting position in the public imagination. He is not just an actor, he is a figure who seems to carry the shadows of the past. His choice of roles, reserved behavior, and even his eccentric acquisitions reinforce this narrative. It's almost as if he is, in some way, playing a role that transcends his career. Is Nicolas Cage merely a common man with a fascinating genealogical heritage? Or do these connections to figures like Vlad the Impaler point to something much greater and more mysterious? Regardless of the answer, the historical connection between Cage and prominent figures from the past remains one of the most intriguing aspects of his life. Perhaps he is simply the guardian of a noble lineage, or perhaps there is something deeper hidden in his blood. From the beginning of his career, Nicolas Cage has always been seen as a figure who defies convention. His presence, both on and off the screen, emanates something difficult to define. It is not just his appearance or professional choices, but a kind of magnetism that seems to transcend common explanations. What exactly makes Cage so different from any other actor or public personality? An evident characteristic is his ability to completely transform himself for every role, delivering performances that oscillate between genius and the absurdly exaggerated. Many critics describe his acting style as Cagean, a category of its own that doesn't fit into any traditional school of acting. Is this merely the result of a unique approach to the craft, or is there something more behind his ability to captivate audiences in an almost hypnotic way? Off-screen, his presence remains enigmatic. Unlike other actors of his generation, Cage maintains an air of mystery that is rarely broken by scandals or excessive exposure. He appears when he wants and in the way he chooses, carefully selecting when and where he will be seen. This partial reclusion makes him even more fascinating. After all, in a world where privacy seems to have disappeared, how does he manage to maintain this impenetrable aura? The way he speaks also adds to the mystery. Nicolas Cage rarely gives traditional interviews, and when he does, his answers are unpredictable. He alternates between philosophical statements and comments that sound like riddles. For example, on one occasion he stated, "I believe time is a human construct. To me, it doesn't exist as something fixed." This type of abstract thinking feeds the idea that Cage may perceive the world in a way most of us cannot. His appearance also plays a fundamental role in this aura. At nearly 60 years old, Cage maintains an appearance that defies his age. Although some changes are noticeable, such as natural aging around the eyes, he retains an air that seems timeless. It's not uncommon to hear people remark that Cage hasn't changed since the 1990s, something that inevitably contributes to theories that he may be beyond the limits of human biology. Moreover, Cage exhibits behavior that many describe as antique. His choice of words, posture, and even gestures are reminiscent of a bygone era, as if he were out of sync with the modern world. This is not a criticism, but rather an observation that reinforces the idea that he does not entirely belong to this time. Is this feeling merely a product of his personality, or is it a clue to something greater? Audiences are also fascinated by his almost mystical relationship with his roles. Cage has stated in interviews that he believes each character chooses him, not the other way around. He describes the process as a type of spiritual connection, where he feels certain roles call to him in an almost supernatural way. This perspective goes beyond what is typically expected from an actor, adding a layer of mystery to his artistic approach. Interestingly, his eccentricity does not alienate his fans. Quite the opposite, it seems to draw them closer. Cage is one of those figures who can create a sense of familiarity, even while keeping his private life completely isolated. This creates a fascinating duality. He is both enigmatic and accessible, a paradox that few can sustain. There is also an almost ritualistic aspect to his professional routine. Reports from film sets indicate that Cage is meticulous with details, even performing small rituals before filming certain scenes. While this could simply be part of his preparation as an actor, some believe these habits reflect a deeper, perhaps even mystical, knowledge. Another curiosity is the way he approaches time. In several interviews, Cage has mentioned that he has a cyclical view of life, believing that the same stories and situations repeat themselves throughout the ages. This perspective is uncommon, and to some, sounds like a belief rooted in personal experiences he may not be able to openly share. His unconventional behavior often defies categorization. Why does he seem so comfortable being different? While many celebrities do everything they can to fit in, Cage appears to go in the opposite direction. Could this be a sign of absolute confidence in himself, or perhaps an indication that he knows something the rest of us do not? The aura of Nicolas Cage is not merely the result of his appearance, professional choices, or behavior. It is something deeper, something that cannot be entirely explained. He is the kind of figure who defies definitions, and perhaps that is what makes him so fascinating. After all, who else could generate so much mystery simply by being who they are? Is Nicolas Cage simply a man comfortable with his eccentricity, or does his presence carry layers of meaning we have yet to uncover? Nicolas Cage rarely responds directly to the speculations surrounding him, especially those involving supernatural mysteries or unusual theories about his life. Have you noticed he never says yes or no? It's always an answer that leaves us even more confused. Genius. Still, in various interviews, his responses leave room for interpretation. What he is hiding, if anything, remains an open question, but his behaviors and carefully chosen words suggest he understands the impact of the mystery surrounding his figure. When first confronted about the famous 1870 photograph, Cage laughed and responded with his characteristic humor. "I'm definitely not a vampire, but if I were, I'd never tell." This seemingly innocent phrase is one of the statements that have fueled the most theories. After all, why didn't he just dismiss the idea as absurd? For many, his response was not a denial but rather a calculated joke to feed public fascination. Then there's the question of his strategic reclusion. While Cage is not entirely absent from the media, he carefully chooses where and how to appear. His interviews are rare and, when granted, are surrounded by statements that seem thoughtfully crafted to provoke more questions than answers. Is this merely the behavior of a private man, or is he deliberately controlling his public narrative? Another intriguing point is how at ease Cage seems with the absurd. He has never shown discomfort with stories linking him to vampirism or immortality. Instead, he seems to enjoy the idea. On one occasion, Cage mentioned that he believes in reincarnation, suggesting that souls can continue to exist over time. This, of course, further fueled theories that he may be more than he appears. There's also his relationship with time. Cage has stated that he doesn't see time as linear, but as a human construct. This viewpoint is unusual, and to some, sounds like the perspective of someone who may have experienced time differently. Is he merely philosophizing, or do these statements reflect something deeper? Even in his art, Cage seems to allude to the mystery of his own life. Many of his roles involve characters who are out of time, trapped between eras, or dealing with questions of mortality and immortality. Vampire's Kiss, Ghost Rider, and even Adaptation are examples of films where his performances transcend the ordinary, almost as if he is portraying aspects of himself. Cage also avoids engaging in debates about most theories surrounding him. He rarely addresses public rumors or seeks to debunk them. This silence contributes to the idea that he might prefer letting the public build their own stories. After all, who holds more power? The one who answers every question or the one who remains enigmatic? Interestingly, the rumors about Nicolas Cage don't seem to bother him. On the contrary, they appear to reinforce his public image as a figure shrouded in mystery. Does he understand something others don't? Silence can be a powerful weapon, especially in a world desperate for attention. Another issue raising suspicions is his constant association with the occult. Although Cage rarely speaks openly about it, he has admitted to having an interest in spiritual energies and mysticism. He has also mentioned feeling drawn to stories and places with a historical charge. For some, this is merely a manifestation of his curious personality. For others, it's further evidence that he may be involved in something greater. Fans and conspiracy theorists often point out that Cage never firmly denies ideas about immortality or vampirism. If he were entirely human, why wouldn't he end the speculation once and for all? This lack of a clear denial leaves room for speculation. Does he avoid addressing it because he knows more than he's willing to reveal? Even more intriguing is how Cage seems always in control of his narrative. Despite his eccentricity, he is rarely the target of scandals or controversies. This ability to navigate fame without losing his privacy or mystery is unusual in Hollywood. It's as if he has a carefully crafted strategy to keep the public fascinated while staying distant enough to protect his secrets. In the end, what Nicolas Cage isn't telling us may be just as important as what he reveals. His ability to maintain an air of mystery in a world obsessed with transparency is, in itself, fascinating. He doesn't need to say anything to remain one of the most enigmatic figures in pop culture. Does Nicolas Cage hold secrets that will never be revealed? Or is he simply an ordinary man who understands the power of mystery? The answer may never be known, but one thing is certain: mystery is an essential part of who he is. Nicolas Cage is not just an actor, he is a living enigma. His timeless appearance, eccentric behavior, and the theories surrounding him have created a narrative that goes beyond his film career. Whether through the 1870 photograph, his genealogical connections to historical figures, or his carefully ambiguous responses, Cage remains a fascinating figure, impossible to define completely. This story is just one piece of the puzzle, and one day, perhaps you'll see the full picture. If this made you think, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It helps the channel grow. Share it too. After all, more voices mean more discoveries.